Welcome to Dartmouth's Got Talent. I'm your host, Dr. Gifford. I'm the superintendent of the Dartmouth Public Schools. And for those new viewers this year, we have this show going on. We had a show last year where we bring in different folks from our school district to give you some information about what's happening in the district and the different schools. So we welcome you and hope you will stick around for future episodes as well. Today my guests are Assistant Principal of the high school, Mike Martin, and Assistant Principal of the DeMello Elementary School, Katie Paveo. And I've asked them to join us today to talk to us about our emergency management planning, our safety and security in our schools, to let the folks at home know what we do in our schools to ensure a safe and secure environment for all our students and staff. So here we go. Thank you for joining me today.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Absolutely. So the first thing before we get started talking about emergency planning and all of that, I'd like you all to give our folks at home a little information about who you are, you know, how long you've been in Dartmouth, and just a little bit about yourself. So Mike, if you want to start.
Yeah, I was a student here in Dartmouth, graduated class of 1990, went to Westfield State, came back, started off as a hall monitor, so I guess I got my start in security here at the high school. Then I was, you know, a substitute teacher and got hired for history. I was doing that for about 17 years, and then I was fortunate enough to get my certification in administration and became a dean at the high school. Wonderful. And one of my particular responsibilities as a dean, and now that I'm an assistant principal, it's the same thing, was the building. Facilities is one of my special areas, so security is very important to us.
Okay, all right, and we'll get into some of that in a minute. Katie?
I spent my career in Dartmouth. I was a 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teacher at the Cushman and Quinn schools, and then 6 years ago made the move to DeMello as the assistant principal. I did not grow up in Dartmouth, but I feel live here now, and as a community member who has children in the schools, I just feel very fortunate to be in such a great district.
To be here, yeah, and it is a great district. So again, thank you both for coming. So we're going to get right into it, and the first thing I want to talk about is we recently, of course, well, over the last year, have developed our new what we call comprehensive emergency management plan, and you both had a role in that. So I kind of wanted to have you explain to the folks about what it's about. Why is the process important? Why did we go through this? Didn't we already have a plan in place? So if one of you could just start talking about that whole process, about the plan.
Yeah, sure. One of the things was that we had, you know, our crisis manual, which was back from, you know, 2005. So you're talking about a document that was over 10 years old, and you think about all the changes that have come into place in 10 years, and unfortunately, you know, tragedies such as, you know, Virginia Tech and, you know, San Bernardino, and we have unfortunately learned quite a lot from those incidences. So what we did was we saw it as being something that was a little bit outdated, specifically in dealing with, you know, the new idea of the ALICE training, which is, you know, a certified program which many states have adopted as well as other schools. And, you know, when Mr. Shea was here, Volk had done ALICE at Volk, and he had kind of brought it here when he was interim superintendent, and the faculty was looking at our handbook, looking at that crisis manual, kind of saying, like, are we going to update this? So this has been a process that's been going on for a while, and it really came from, you know, teachers. You know, it came from the bottom up, and it was really something that we, you know, worked on, and we got all the stakeholders involved. We made sure we got, you know, the police involved, fire involved, social workers, nurses, administrators. So we really wanted to make sure that everyone's voice was heard and everyone was able to have input and to have their expertise incorporated into this document. So it was really nice to see how so many people came together for a common goal to do what was best for our schools and for our students.
Right.
And I was just going to say, I think it's important to have the plan and hope that you never need it. It's like the insurance plan that you hope you never have to use. But we don't want to be in that situation and not know what to do. And as Mike said, it's been vetted through so many different eyes and different lenses, that the police and the fire, and it's been a long process. It wasn't something that was just sort of haphazardly put together. We've looked over drafts, we've changed drafts, we've, you know, gone back at it and made sure that it's really a comprehensive plan, that everyone knows their role of what to do if ever, God forbid, there was sort of an incident that you needed to take control of.
Right, absolutely. And you're right, as one of the people that really put it together as far as the editing, keep doing the editing and editing. I can certainly vouch for that we got so much feedback. And even when we thought we were done, go back and edit it again. So it was a great collaborative project that has come to fruition. And I'm glad you mentioned that the police and fire were involved, because without them, some of those areas that we don't have expertise in.
Yes, and it's one of the things too that it's really important to get their expertise. Like I talked about my certifications in school administration. Like my expertise is in curriculum maps and inclusion classes and things like that. But it's one of the things that our Dartmouth Police and our Dartmouth Fire are so good to us. And we're very fortunate at the high school to have the school resource officer, Officer Pacheco, so we get his expertise, and he's helped build bridges, with, we'll talk about him probably a little bit later, Detective Kenny, Chief Salazar has come, and I know he's met with Mr. Gould. So we've built those bridges and those lines of communication, because again, we're all in this to help protect the kids. It's not just ours. We just don't own the kids from 7:30 to 2:30. It's everybody is vested in this.
Absolutely. And I have noticed that the fire and police, and of course we work more closely with the police than the fire. Thank goodness we haven't had too much to do with them. But boy, they are right there for every instant, whether to offer advice about something, whatever it is. So I'm very, very grateful for them, for that relationship. Could you offer us a description of some of the major highlights of the plan? You talked about changes that have happened since an old plan was developed. I'm thinking specifically about the idea of, and we'll talk specifically later on about Alice, but what shelter in place means and why we might use that. And folks at home might have heard the term lockdown, and we're really not using that anymore. And also how we go about assessing for a bomb threat, because that's changed. So if you could speak to that.
Yeah, I think what we've learned is that giving people the information that they need is the most critical piece, and that based on that information, we make the most prudent decision for what we need to do in that time. So it used to be that we would hear the word lockdown, or and kind of everything would halt, everything would stop. We would lock our doors, we would pull our shades, and we would sort of
hunker down.
Hunker down, yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
But I think as we've learned, we have to kind of assess the viability of a threat or of what's going on, and sometimes the best decision is to leave the building. Sometimes the safest decision is to stay in the building. Sometimes we don't need to stop what we're doing, we just might need to clear the hallway. So I think it's really about the information, and we have a lot of new ways and new technologies to sort of get the information that we need and get it out to people, so that in working with our law enforcement, that they help us to make the best decision for the time. So you mentioned shelter in place. If there's someone who gets hurt in a building, for instance, and an ambulance needs to come through, or the paramedics, we don't necessarily need to stop teaching. We don't need to stop what we're doing. We don't need to close everything down. We can clear the hallways so that they can have access to the building. And from an elementary perspective, giving that information sometimes puts kids at ease. So we tell them what's going on so that they know, why this is happening.
Right. How about bomb threat assessment, Mike?
Well, with the bomb threat, because I don't know if the community knows, we did have one last year. We use the state police guidelines. So the first thing we do when we get a bomb threat, our secretaries, who usually are the ones that get the threat, our custodians, our administrators, are trained to, one, collect information right off the bat. So they have a list of questions right at the phone that they, try to ask. Try to say, do I hear any sort of background noise? Is it, coming from within? They look at the caller ID number to try to, get as much information as possible. The custodian sees something on a wall or a note on the floor, or a teacher, they know how to, and they're trained in how to collect that information, so that then the administrators are working with the SROs in our school or with the police and the other schools that don't have the SROs can, using the state police guidelines, make that assessment. Is it low, medium, or high? And last year, the FBI was even on it. A lot of these bomb threats were robocalls. They were actually coming from Russia. And many school systems were victims of these, automated bomb scares. And one of the things that we did is that we just go through that state police guidelines, and we assess the threat. Is it low, medium, or high? And then our actions are based on that threat assessment, which again is done collaboratively. It's not one person making that decision. I know that when we were there in the office, it was superintendent of schools, the principal, the police were there, the fire was there, and we all kind of came to a consensus of what our next steps would be.
Yes, and that's important for folks to know. And one of the things we're going to have for our next step for our plan is to have an evening discussion with any community members or parents that want to come to kind of go over some of those nuances, because of course any incident, then folks always wonder, well, why didn't they evacuate, or why didn't they do X, Y, Z? So it's nice to have that out there, that we have reasons for everything.
Exactly. And that's one of the things, with our Alice training that they talked about, is that it's specifically dealing with bomb threats. There hasn't been an incident where a bomber has actually called in a threat before it. Because most of the time, actually 100% of the time, is that they want to see the chaos. They want to see what's going on. So when you think about probably the most famous bombing in recent memory, the marathon bombings, they didn't call that threat in. They didn't say they were going to do that. They wanted to create the chaos. They wanted the scene. And that's one of the things I think that kind of spurred the state police to come out with these recommendations, because they're like, you know what, like we need to do the threat assessment first, because there is no evidence to say that people call in bomb threats that actually carry them out, that most of the time you're not going to know.
Right, exactly. So let's talk about Alice, because you have both been to advanced Alice training. We've trained our staff, and it's so I want the folks to understand what that is. How is that a component of what we might have to do? And you've both been, so I can't wait to hear your description.
I think the word that you just used, that component, is a really important thing to keep in mind when we talk about Alice, that it is one thing that comes in a whole repertoire of what we do. And really, hopefully it's something that you would never need to do, because it's really something in response to an intruder in the building. And as I kind of talked about before, it's an acronym, and people think it sort of goes in order, but it doesn't. It's just a different set of, it's alert, and they use the word lockdown
for that,
but it's information, and it's counter, and then it's evacuate. And it's just a set of tools that if you were to encounter someone in the building that shouldn't be there, it's using that information that you have to make the best decision possible. So if you can get away from the danger, by all means, that should be your first set of things that you do, is to get away. But there could be an instance where you couldn't. If there was someone in the hallway right outside your room, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with lockdowns. We don't just kind of cower and wait. So we respond. I think one of the things that the pushback to Alice is people think was that we're teaching kids to fight. And that's sort of the pushback that we get in the elementary school. And that's not what we're doing at all. What we're trying to do is put more tools in kids' toolboxes, so that if they, God forbid, ever should happen to encounter that, they have some tools to rely on.
Good, good.
And the thing about Alice is that it's not specific to schools. We think about Alice
a good point.
when we think about Sandy Hook and Columbine and Virginia Tech, but really Alice is just, as Katie said, a kind of like a philosophy. Like you can use this in the movie theater, you can use this in businesses. It's just basically, the alert is to let people know that there's something going on. And then, as she said, that's very important, because especially teachers are very sequential.
Absolutely.
You think about our lesson plans or our school year, everything is, in order. And you could jump right from, the alert to the counter if it's happening right here in this room. Or you could do the lockdown and barricade, because again, we don't want to trust locks. So part of the big training was, think about, as we're looking around the room, how would you barricade yourself in? Try to put as much between you and the perpetrator as possible. So is it moving your desk closer to the door so you can just push it? Is it a file cabinet? Is it carabiners over the arms that swing out? Or a 2x4 to wrap around the door handle so someone can't get in? Because what the training has taught us is that these individuals will move on quickly. You know what I mean? If there's a barricade, they'll move on to a softer target.
They won't wait to try to get in.
Exactly. They'll go to the next room. Especially, Virginia Tech showed us that.
That's right.
And it's about creating time. It's about slowing down the process so that you can get law enforcement in who are really going to be the people who take over. So it's really, I think, just about
and that's one of the
keeping
things
yourself
that,
safe as long as you can.
That we, that I felt when we did that training, because we were, put into situations where, they used air horns for gunshots, and we had the the airsoft masks on, and they shot us with airsoft.
Yep.
And it was amazing in the lockdown, the traditional lockdown, how much time we had sitting there. It seemed like forever.
Forever,
right?
right.
And you're like going like, I could so be like a mile from now. And, like,
Yes.
I'm not a big runner,
Right,
but
but you could have been
I could
gone.
have been a mile from here.
Yeah.
And even the second scenario was just the lockdown and barricade. And even still, like, the person was on another side of the building. We only had 2 classrooms, going.
Right.
And it was like, all right, we've barricaded this thing, and we're like looking at our watch,
Let's
like,
go.
there's
Yeah.
so much time that we
Right.
could
Right.
to get out. And it was really good to be in that, because
Good.
to actually feel what it was like,
Right.
and it just kind of was like, you know what, like, there's no way I'm sitting here. Like,
Yeah, I
we're
think
gonna go.
the best word that one of our staff used after we trained was empowered. They said, I feel empowered
It's a great
that-
word.
to do something
Right.
and not just
Right.
sort of,
Right, and that's what we want them to feel with all of this in the end, is to be able to make judgment calls. They've got the information, make the best judgment calls.
Right.
So that's a great word, empower,
Yeah.
to
Yep.
do that. So let's move on to a couple of other things. Aside from our plan and the practice that we've been doing and all of that, we have some other safety measures in our schools. You have your badge on,
Yep.
that's one. If we could kind of talk about some of those things, what's in place in our schools from both
You want to start
perspectives?
at the elementary?
Sure,
or
sure. So I think at the elementary level, at DeMello in particular, the biggest changes are physical. So in Potter and DeMello schools, you used to have to kind of come into the building to go into the office. So one of the things that was done is a new office was built where we have 2 sets of doors in all
Yeah.
our buildings now to get in, and it really has just minimized the number of people being in the building that don't need to be there.
Right.
So parents who are dropping things off, and we want people to be part of our school community, but safety has to come first. So
yeah.
if you belong in the building, by all means we want you in the building. But if we don't need you in the building, there's a space for you to
Right,
be, to
right.
drop off backpacks, to do all that. So it's, they use the word kind of trap, where we
Yep,
have it's
yep.
a lobby, if you will,
Right.
where you have sort of an entrance to come in. So that's sort of the physical change. As you said, Mike has his badge on. We have swipe passes to be able to get into the building. All of our doors are locked throughout the day. At the elementary level, it's, I think, a little bit different, because we wanted foster that sense of security with kids, and you don't want kids to worry about these things, but at the same time, we need to have that in the forefront of our mind.
Right,
So-
right, good.
And at the high school level, we're fortunate to have a relatively new building. So a lot of those things were in place. Like, our school already had like what they call that trap
Yep.
at the main entrance. So a lot of what we had to do was start to change like people's ideas, because again, schools are different. We're not prisons, you know what I mean? Like, we've always been, welcoming, and the
Right.
community coming in, and that's just the photocopy repair guy, or this guy is just delivering
Right.
FedEx is delivering MCAS, So one of the things that we really had to change was just kind of people's view of security here,
Okay.
and we really had to tighten it up and say, no, everyone has to come in through the main entrance. They have to stop at security. They have to sign in. They have to get a visitor's pass. And if they don't have a visitor's pass, we turn them back around and say, you have to go get one. If you're here to see a faculty member or a guidance counselor, you have to check in the front, and our security
Right.
will call someone to say, you have a visitor waiting for you in the main lobby, can you please come down to escort them? So we don't have people,
Right.
walking around the building. Again, the high school is a little bit different, because our day never really ends. Even though dismissal's
true.
at 2:03, and we had, we're very supported by the district. We got 2 second shift security monitors.
Right.
One works Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. The other one works Tuesdays and Thursdays. So now we have someone at the security desk looking at the cameras throughout the school, even after hours, so
Right.
that when visitors come in, there's someone there, vetting the
Yeah.
people coming into our building, whether it be for an athletic event or a music concert or a play, or even last night we had an SAT prep class
Yeah,
going on.
yeah.
We had the math team had their practice going on in
Right.
the classroom. We had the theater company in the auditorium. Band had left at 6. Football had left at 6:30.
never ends here.
Volleyball was in the
Yeah.
gym, so it was really nice to have that person there
Right.
at the desk that has access to the security cameras, that can kind of keep an eye on the school. And their job is to go around and they check every single door to make sure it's locked. They look for suspicious packages or backpacks that might have been left behind.
Yep.
They close windows, so we have people here not only during the day, but also afterwards.
After hours, because
as well.
you're right, you said there's tons of activities going on. I go by at 9 o'clock, and of course, the band could still be practicing, or
Yeah.
people are everywhere. So it's a well-used campus. You talked about the SROs, so can we mention a little bit about that? I
Yeah.
know we have in the middle and high school,
Yeah.
and just kind of how that partnership works.
It's great. You mean,
And of course, for folks at home, that's school resource officer, in
Yes.
case they don't know.
and what it is, it's a link between the schools and the police department. It's shared communication. It's building relationships between the two. So it's not just, if something happens in the community over the weekend, he gives us the heads up and say, hey, listen, we heard about this fight at the mall.
Yeah.
Just be on, just let
Yeah,
you know.
on alert.
Or we do the same thing, like, hey, hey, this is kind of going on, just so you guys would know. Also, it's great to have him in the building for the security purposes. His role, if the unthinkable ever were to happen, would be to go to that spot. That's his role.
Yeah.
And, when we had the bomb scare, just again, building those relationships and having him in here. And the most important thing is that I started off actually as a criminal justice major at Westfield, and one of the things that they, my intro to CJ course, they said most people's opinions of police officers is based on their first experience. If you have a negative experience with a police officer, then you probably have a negative opinion.
Yeah.
If you have a positive experience, then you probably have a positive
Right.
opinion. So having the SRO in the school as someone that is a resource for students to come up to see, to talk to if they're having a problem. We've had students that have gotten into automobile accidents that, want advice, or, he goes down to the health classes and talks about, drugs and alcohol
Right.
and drunk driving laws and things like that. It allows our students, the 1,000 of them that are here, to kind of have that positive experience with the police, so that they see the police as someone that is helpful, someone that is there to protect
Right.
and to serve, because we all know that sometimes adolescents don't make the best
Yeah.
decisions, and sometimes
Yeah,
their
we
first
know that.
impression can be,
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
negative. But it's having them in here and building that positive relationship,
good.
having students see him as someone that is there to help them, to protect them. I think is really important,
Right.
and even for the staff,
Right.
it makes them feel at ease knowing that we have a police officer in the building that is there as a resource to help them and to protect them as well.
Good. And I know, having attended many evening events, both the middle and high school, they attend.
Yep.
Very often, they're in our events. The community series that we've been running, we ran last year, they would attend, and so it goes beyond the policing piece, as you
Yes.
said, to real good supportive partnership.
Yep.
And I will say, while we don't have the SRO in
Right.
our buildings full time, each elementary school has sort of a link of who to go to.
Yeah.
So we do link up with the high school just due to our proximity. And we have had the SRO. He came to our open house this year. And in past years, we've kind of worked in conjunction with them. If we've had incidents with students, they've been great about coming down
Right.
and talking to them and kind of working with our kids, as Mike said, to give them a positive experience. And, I just think it's a really nice partnership between the
Good.
schools and the police and in the community. So.
Right, right. And I want to mention that, the community, and then I'm going to wrap up with one more question. That we know that the town, through town meeting, has really supported our district budgetarily for monies to provide the cameras, the security locks, the different, the lobbies, the doors that went in. So we want to thank them, as well as, again, the partnership with the police, and the chief is so supportive and providing us the SROs really on his budget.
Yeah.
So, and any help that we can have with the elementary, he's really up for that
wonderful.
as well. So I want to thank that. So I want to wrap up with, we've talked a lot about this, but how do we create a balance of, it's a safe and secure place, you all need to check in, but yet we want to welcome you, and kids, don't worry, kind of help let that balance between comfort and aware. How do we do that?
It's the biggest challenge,
Yeah.
in all honesty,
Yeah.
because you want to be safe, you want to secure, you want to have procedures in place, you want to make sure you have protocols, but you got to remember that you're dealing with a person. I mean, this is a parent that's coming in,
right.
and yes, they may be upset, but they're upset because you're talking about their son or daughter that
Sure.
might have just been in a fight,
Right,
or
right.
might have just failed a class and they, and they want to go, talk to the guidance counselor. How come I didn't? And it's like, and that's what, when we hire the security at the front desk, we make sure that's like, it's very important to say, you're the face of Dartmouth High School. You're the first impression that a visitor has coming in to what our school is, what are our core values. So it's really something that we've trained and we've, talked to them about, that first impression. And also, it's one of those things where it's like, you can be very, I don't want to say, you can follow the rules, but then be nice about it. You know what I mean?
Sure.
There's one way to say you need to wear your IBAG.
Right.
Excuse me, can you just please,
Right.
wear your IBAG, your ID, your
Yeah.
visitor ID, so people can see you in the halls. And that's the biggest thing, even with the Alice, is the common speak. We don't use codes anymore, code red, code green, or things like that,
Right.
because we want people to know what's going on. So even with our visitors, excuse me, we're going to ask you to wear the ID, just so if anyone sees you, they know that you have a legitimate purpose in here. We're not telling them you have to wear an ID. And we go around and we check the doors, but we do it in a in a nice way. No one knows I'm checking doors as I'm going around. Because again, the students need to feel safe and secure. They can't feel like this is a place that something bad is going to happen to them. We prepare, but our main mission is education.
Yes. If we could stick to that. Right?
Exactly.
I think some of it is normalizing what we do. We do a fire drill every month, and no one really gives a second thought to that.
Right.
So we teach our kids about stranger danger, right? And we don't really think about that. So some of it is just normalizing that this is what we do because we have to be prepared, and we teach our kids that, right? We teach our kids to be prepared for everything.
Right.
And as Mike said, I think some of it is the balance between. Our job is to keep these, they send us their most precious gift every day and ask us to keep them safe.
That's
so
right.
there are things we have to do that.
Right.
And it's a balance between doing that and sort of the business of teaching and learning. So.
Right. And I think we're off to a good start. And we're going to provide more training for our staff coming up and really work through that. So I have to say I'm really thrilled with what's been happening in Dartmouth. I'm really thrilled with when I walk into school that everything is in place and our kids are happy and they're joyful and they're learning because of the dedication of everyone of making sure that they're safe and secure. And that is our main mission. So I'd like to thank you for coming on in today.
Thank you for having us.
I'm hoping the audience gets a good earful and understands really well what's happening in our schools and the work that we do to ensure that, as you said, their most precious gift to us are their children. So anyway, so this is Dr. Bonnie Gifford signing off from Dartmouth's Got Talent. I hope you enjoyed our show today. Once again, it was Mike Martin from our high school and Katie Paveo from DeMello School joining me today. And we hope that you will tune in for this episode as well as our future episodes of Dartmouth's Got Talent.